This is Terrence McNally, and this week I share with you one of my favorite previously recorded interviews with Don Barlett and Jim Steele about their book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. They've been writing about this stuff since their 1992 Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper series, America, What Went Wrong. This interview originally aired in September 2012. Let's suppose for a moment there was a country where the people in charge charted a course that eliminated millions of good-paying jobs. Suppose they gave away several million more jobs to other nations. Finally, imagine that the people running this country implemented economic policies that enabled those at the very top to grow ever richer while most others grew poorer. You wouldn't want to live in such a place, would you? Too bad. You already do. I'm reading the words of today's guests, Don Barlett and Jim Steele. I go on. These are some of the consequences of failed U.S. government policies that have been building over the last 3 decades, the same policies that people in Washington today are intent on keeping or expanding. Most significant of all, the American dream of the last half-century has been revoked for millions of people, a dream rooted in a secure job, a home in the suburbs, the option for families to live on one income rather than two, a better life than your parents had, and a still better life for your children. U.S. government policies consistently have failed to protect that dream in the face of growing international competition. Instead, they favored the very forces that shift jobs, money, and influence abroad. As a result, the United States is about to enter the 21st century much the same way as it left the 19th, with a two-class society. Did you notice that line, about to enter the 21st century? Barlett and Steele wrote those words in 1992. They are the first words of their Pulitzer Prize-winning series of articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer, which led to the #1 best-selling book, America, What Went Wrong. I vividly remember America, What Went Wrong. I have the feeling that I even saw the Inquirer articles back then, though I can't swear to it. They put their finger on things and connected dots that really established a lens through which to view the next 20 years. Fast forward, the crash, followed by the inability and the unwillingness of government to respond effectively, opened a lot of people's eyes. The point of view of the 99% movement is basically the one Barlett and Steele described and predicted in 92, at the birth of the Clinton era. Now, a lot of able people have followed their path, perhaps for me most notably Hacker and Pearson in winner-take-all politics. And I still find myself highlighting a lot of stuff in the new book, a whole lot. Here's my biggest question. Barlett and Steele know about everything else that's out there. I want to learn what they found out in putting this book together that was new to them. Where did they find or connect new dots? What surprised them? What should we be paying closer attention to moving forward? And finally, how do we turn things around? On Freeform, we explore the lives, the work, the ideas of individuals that I suspect have pieces of the puzzle of a world that just might work. We look at new, innovative, provocative approaches to business, environment, health, science, politics, media, culture, all based on the fact that I believe we can do better, and I want to find out how. Don Barlett and Jim Steele have worked together for 4 decades. First, at the Philadelphia Inquirer, where they won 2 Pulitzer Prizes and scores of other national journalism awards. Then at Time Magazine, where they earned 2 National Magazine Awards. And since 2006, at Vanity Fair, where they are contributing editors. They also have written 7 books, including the one I mentioned, the New York Times #1 bestseller, America, What Went Wrong. Welcome, Don Barlett and Jim Steele, to Freeform.
Great to be with you, Terrence.
Good to be with you, Terrence.
Okay, thank you. I like listeners to get a feel for the people behind the ideas and the work that we talk about. So how did you two team up? And if it was for one story or one beat at first, how did you decide to stick together?
Well, it's a great question because it's like a lot of things in journalism. We got together on an experimental basis on one project. We'd each been doing different things. And at the end of this project, which lasted about a year, which examined a lot of inner-city housing frauds, and about 4 dozen people were indicted, and it changed a number of national policies, Don and I just sort of looked at each other and said, that kind of worked, didn't it? And so we have been proposing projects ever since then. Nobody ever came by and anointed us a team, per se, but we just found that the work habits were similar, and when 2 people can work together, you can undertake much, much larger projects than any person working alone can. So the partnership is based on similar work habits, a similar view of looking at what is fair and unfair in this society. And the only thing we know for sure is we'll never run out of work.
That's sadly true. How do you two work together? How does the team operate? Is one the data wonk and the other one is one the story guy, or you get what I'm saying? I've actually collaborated on screenplays, so there's some. I have a sense of this a little bit.
Well, we're a little bit different in that when we start the research, one of us will, take one area and the other will take another area, and we just kind of go from there. Whoever picks up something tends to run with it. The other knows that and feeds everything related to that subject over to the other person. It just, I don't know, kind of works.
And the reason we think it works is, unlike some teams you hear about where one is the data person, as you mentioned, and one person may be the writer, over the years we've split things pretty much down the middle as much as we could. We each like to report, which means and search, which means we're a sound mind. Neither one of us particularly likes to write, which also means we're a sound mind. And as a result of this, those habits are also similar. And so that's let us take on a lot of things. I would go out and do something and then write a segment of that, maybe a part of a story or a part of a chapter or part of a series. I'd kick it over to Don. He would know something about that. He would plug in his thoughts, bump it up perhaps, and then I would do the same thing when something would happen to him. So we edit each other pretty vigorously, and before it ever goes to an editor, because we know how complex issues are, and we know also what it takes to bump those things up to the point where you really connect with a reader.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it really makes sense to me for exactly that reason you're talking about, is that when you're dealing with complex issues, to kind of raise the bar sort of for each other and at the same time help each other across. It makes very good sense. I'm Terrence McKinley, and I'm speaking with Don Barlett and Jim Steele about their latest book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. You can learn more at americawhatwentwrong.org. That's one word, americawhatwentwrong.org, or at BARLETTandJIM.com. And I'm going to spell Barlett because Google even knows people don't do it right.
Right.
they give you,
yes.
If you put in Bartlett, you get you guys, But it's right. B-A-R-L-E-T-T. B-A-R-L-E-T-T and A-N-D, Steele, S-T-E-E-L-E. So it's easy to misspell either one of them. BARLETTandJIM.com. We're going to get to the new book, guys, but I also want to talk about some of your other stories. You did a story for Sports Illustrated in 2001 on the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics.
Yes.
And this is part of Mitt Romney's resume that he points to in his run for president. Mitt Romney, now an advocate of small government and all of that and so on. Briefly, what did you learn?
Well, this has come back to us in recent days, even though this story is 10 years old, because what we showed is that Utah, which has this antipathy to federal taxes, had raided the federal treasury for just about every conceivable kind of grant and loan and benefit imaginable to finance the Salt Lake City Olympics back in 2002. I mean, the roads, the infrastructure in and around Salt Lake City, that whole area in the basin there, are going to be in great shape for years and years based on the fact that federal taxpayers everywhere shelled out $1.5 billion, more than the federal government had spent on all previous Olympics combined.
That's right. And for people, that we had done 7 Olympics up till then, and one of them was the LA Olympics, which people remember. Another was the Atlanta Olympics, not right. that far, before, and yet this was more than all of them combined.
And from a place that supposedly doesn't like federal taxes, unless, of course, it's going their way. But the whole operation out there, which Romney headed, turned out to be absolutely expert at getting those kinds of monies. And that was what was so bizarre about his criticism of the London Olympics, because maybe that's what he was pointing fingers at the mayor of London. Maybe he had figured out a way to pounce on the exchequer there in London to get the kind of money he needed. But the Salt Lake Olympics, in addition to some of the scandals that preceded the early days of it, was in a total class by itself in terms of how much money it squeezed out of the federal treasury.
Right, and then you point out that they actually, they were so creative about it that they got money from, I think you say 36 different federal departments.
You name the federal agency, and they had their fingers in the till. That's what makes Romney's comments and his portrayal of him as the brilliant rescuer of the Salt Lake City Games. They were in trouble, no question about that. But without the U.S. government, without his ability to raid the U.S. Treasury, this wouldn't have happened.
And let me read two quotes that I get from your article. One is from Tom Warren, who was the head of the state's Department of Transportation at the time. Quote, "We are without shame using the Olympics to try to get federal funds." Quote, "We've designed a strategy to separate Utah from the 49 other states." And then Mitt Romney himself, the president of the Salt Lake City Olympic Committee, "We couldn't have done it without them. These are America's games." So I guess he didn't build that.
Good point. Good point. He did not build it.
So
very good.
Yeah, but the other thing you also point out is that not only did they raid the Treasury, which we're pointing out the sort of the irony of that, but it was also one where his personal friends and associates, the resort industry, did very well.
Well, that was just one of the byproducts of the games, that's all. I mean, the venues often just happened to be in locations owned by his friends or were developed for the benefit of his friends.
One of the subplots of that whole story, Terrence, goes to the heart of these resorts, which had to do with one resort fairly close to Salt Lake City, owned by a very, very wealthy Utahn. He exchanged some land he owned in remote upper Utah for federal land near his resort, ostensibly to create a world-class ski resort for the Olympics. Of course, what it did was create a world-class ski resort in general. The land he exchanged with was land that previously that had gone for hiking and all kinds of things by people in Salt Lake City that then became part of his resort. What did Utah get in return? They got land so remote in parts of northern Utah, vehicles couldn't even get into some of this land. The only critters on some of these parcels were, of course, wild animals. So it was an exchange of land usable by animals for land usable by people. That previously been used.
It was a nice trade-off.
And usable, especially by fairly rich people who go to those ski resorts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I can see is that if you do the LA Olympics, you build a place where bicycles race, you spruce up a track or something. But when you do a Winter Olympics, we're talking ski resorts.
Exactly.
It's in the very nature of what you're doing. Again, I'm Terrence McNally. I'm speaking with Don Barlett and Jim Steele. We're going to talk about their latest book, The Betrayal of the American Dream, but we're talking right now about some of their other past investigative work. You can learn more at barlettandsteele.com or americawhatwentwrong.org. You did a really extensive expose article on Monsanto in Vanity Fair in 2008.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to go into, as I did into the Olympics one with details and so on, but for very briefly, what should people know about Monsanto? What sort of makes Monsanto almost unique in its role in our agriculture and our economy?
The aggressiveness with which they are pushing their genetically modified seeds. There's soybeans, a number of other products. I guess hay is coming in, alfalfa, a whole range of things but soybeans are sort of the heart of the Monsanto thrust. And people
in Monsanto's ideal world, everything you eat will come from a Monsanto seed, and you will pay Monsanto a royalty for eating it. It's a pretty good gimmick.
It's an outstanding. I mean, Vandana Shiva has done. I've had her on the program talking about this sort of thing. But the for people who don't know it, one of the most outrageous things is if you're a farmer. Let's say your family has farmed for generations. Farmers save their seeds. That's what farming is. And here you are not only not allowed to save them, you are in big trouble if you do.
And in fact, one of the things we found was that, the intimidation that the Monsanto engaged in, they had private detectives. These detectives would videotape farmers coming out of their house, on their tractors, in their fields. And what happens with these seeds is a lot of them sometimes will blow from a field, a soybean field, where they're planted in GMOs to another farmer who doesn't believe in them and doesn't want them. There are a number of farmers out there who just prefer to do things the old ways. They're finally being overtaken by these GMOs because Monsanto is pushing them so much, and it's very hard to maintain your independence with seeds flying around like that. But what astonished us was almost the Gestapo-like tactics that Monsanto employs to try to keep those farmers in line. I mean, we ran across lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, especially out in the Midwest, where a lot of these crops are grown, where they engage in these practices to try to bring farmers to heel and get them to sign agreements and so forth. And they're doing this not just in the U.S. now, but with a number of their other seeds, like cotton, they're doing it abroad. There have been some big scandals in India about that as well. So it's a total new turn in the way we grow crops, not just food crops, but others as well, that has tremendous ramifications for the future.
You know, they are so vigorous in pursuing. It's like Jim said, if the seeds blow onto an adjacent field, they will go after that small farmer, and the small farmer is then put in the position of having to defend his life because the assumption is that he stole their seeds.
Oh, my God. And a lot of the most GMO crops are used in feed for animals. Yeah. But one of the things that you also cover in the story is BFT in dairy products. Talk about that. That is, and what they're trying to do at this point.
This was the growth hormone to increase milk production in dairy cows. And Monsanto, by the way, has since sold that division, that product. But some farmers who wanted to sell milk put on their cartons no growth hormone, BFT.
Yeah.
Monsanto went after those dairies, went to the Federal Trade Commission, filed an action against them. I mean, some of these are just small dairies. They're not big dairies, but they're just people who want to produce milk the natural way, the way it's been produced for years and years and years, and sell it to their customers that way. Monsanto went after them, alleging a kind of false advertising and a discriminatory advertising, depriving the consumer of choices or so forth. That eventually was thrown out, and Monsanto itself later, if I'm not mistaken, sold that division. I think it was to Lilly, but I could be wrong on that.
I mean, if someone says contains no BFT hormones, they claim you're disparaging BFT hormones. And,
right.
You know,
exactly.
You have said nothing. You have merely said you don't contain it.
I mean, it's the same thing you'd get on any product that you see in a store with may or may not have something.
Right.
The consumer should want to know what's there. And that's all it was. Well, they went after those people. Yeah. And we talked to a number of the dairies where they had been sort of fighting this battle. And some of these dairies are rather small compared to the size of something like an international, multinational company like Monsanto. But it's typical of the aggressiveness of Monsanto. It's one of the most aggressive companies Don and I have ever encountered in all of our work, whether it was oil companies or so forth. They're really almost in a class by themselves.
Yeah, and dealing with something so essential to all of us as our food. One last thing, and then we'll move on, but most countries, or very many developed countries, label products that contain GMOs.
Yes.
America does not.
We're one of the exceptions out there.
Yeah.
You don't want to tell people that a company doesn't, that a food product does not have GMOs.
Yeah. And it's that same theory that they had with the BFTs in dairy, but it extends to all these things. And so American consumers, American people, are one of the few that cannot tell when they pick up a product whether it does or does not. And again, it's not saying bad or not. Just give people the information, give people the choice.
Exactly. Let people decide for themselves what they want to eat or not eat. And this is really what is really evil about this practice.
Most of these companies that do this, like Monsanto, you know, most of their whole corporate culture is like freedom. Like
exactly,
we should have the right to do this. We should have the right to do that. Well, why shouldn't that same freedom extend to the advertising of the products so that we know what's in them?
Yeah, I was going to go exactly there, which is these are the people who hold up, you know, and yet the people shouldn't be free to know. I'm Terrence McNally. I'm speaking with Don Barlett and Jim Steele. We're talking about their investigative reporting and their latest book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. One last one, because I thought your article on SAIC,
yes,
which is perhaps the least known huge, a privatization company in the country, just briefly. And to listeners, I recommend go back and check out Sports Illustrated's story on the Olympics, or go back to the Vanity Fair archives for the Monsanto story or this SAIC. Just briefly, who is SAIC?
Science Applications International Corporation is the name. And it is a brilliant, sort of like Monsanto, a brilliant company when it comes to developing a way of doing business. SAIC doesn't come up with products or anything. What it does is look for areas in which the government might have a need for something, and then immediately seizes upon that, whether it's a new tank, especially in intelligence, in intelligence work, whatever they can do, listening devices, you name it. They will immediately flood the area with research and come up with products and sell them to the U.S. government.
This is exactly the kind of company Dwight Eisenhower, when he left the White House, had in mind with his famous military-industrial complex. And he told everybody to be aware of that he's become too powerful. SAIC didn't exist at that time. They weren't founded until 1969. But then, in our own time, I don't know what the current employment was, but at the time we wrote that story, I believe the employment was around 45,000.
Right, in 2006, 45,000, 9,000 federal contracts, two of them worth more than $1 billion each.
And here is a company that didn't even exist in 1969 that builds its entire business around these federal contracts. And you'll hear a lot of conservatives say things, well, isn't it really better to privatize some of these government operations rather than having government servants do it and blah, 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 because it's more efficient, blah. Well, here's the other side of that story. When you have a private company and you finish one contract that the government asks, what do you want to do? You want to come up with another contract, maybe even if the agency doesn't need it, to make sure you keep everybody employed and keep that gravy train rolling. So rather than maybe always providing things that are needed, make-work things get created, and especially when so many people come out of government that flow into SAIC. It had a tremendous stock program that was constantly dangling before folks when they were in government, like if you ever retire, there's a place for you. The stock options are fabulous over there. You can make a lot of money. So many were very willing to grant contracts and perhaps down the line get on the board or work for the company. So it was a very vicious circle. There's a lot of that in defense contracting in general, but there was a particular amount of it with SAIC because it was almost all of its existence a private company where they had the flexibility to grant those kinds of special perks.
Yeah, so that revolving door in action. Go ahead, Don.
The other thing that's really different about this is in the old days, if a company was going to engage in classified defense work, they would bring in people, train them, keep them on the payroll until they secured their clearances, obtained the security clearances they needed to do the work, and then go to work. What SAIC did is really ripped up that script, because what they can do is they're a company that's filled with people with security clearances, so they don't have to train anybody. They don't have to spend any money whatsoever to train someone to get that security clearance. They've already got the people. They'll move them anywhere into any field, and at no cost.
And then the other thing you point out is that some of their biggest projects turned out to be colossal failures at our expense.
Oh, this is especially true in the intelligence field. Some of their intelligence projects were spectacular failures. Now, they would argue that they weren't, they were valuable learning experiences. But, spare me.
Okay, now we're going to shift. I'm Terrence McNally. I'm speaking with Don Barlett and Jim Steele. We're going to shift to the material in The Betrayal of the American Dream. But first, let me ask, what are your hopes for AmericaWhatWentWrong.org? What is that entity, and how did it happen?
Well, what this is a website based at American University in a part of the School of Communications there called the Investigative Reporting Workshop. And the workshop is founded and overseen by an old friend of ours, named Chuck Lewis, who's probably the preeminent fellow in the field of nonprofit investigative journalism. He's been doing this kind of work for many, many years. He founded the Center for Public Integrity in Washington, which goes back to really 1990 when nonprofit investigative journalism didn't even exist. And they've had to their credit many, many remarkable projects over the years, both in this country and abroad. So when we began getting emails from people, we've always heard from people ever since American What Went Wrong, but about, 4 or 5 years ago, we began starting to get more of these people saying, I dusted off my copy of American What Went Wrong, and I read it, my gosh, this is so applicable today. And then another one said, why don't you go back and look at things? Things are worse now, other things have happened. On and on, we kept getting these emails. And so we talked to Chuck, and Chuck not only thought it was a good idea, but he said, could we collaborate with you on this? Could we provide some of the research assistance and a website that would also be a way to post a lot of the research, not only yours, but that from other people. So needless to say, it turned out to be an excellent arrangement for everybody. So a lot of the original research in the Betrayal of the American Dream, I say a lot of it, maybe 10 to 15,000 words, 15% of the book, parts of it appeared on that website before it was, rewritten and into the book. It also provided a way for people to contact us, for us to find more people who had been hit one way or another in this whole economic downturn. And it also turned out that our former newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, when it got wind of this, it said, we would really like to excerpt these parts when they began appearing on the website. So it turned out to be a very unusual collaboration in this era where things are no longer just one. They're no longer just radio or newspapers or magazines or a website, but they're very often a combination of all of these, and that's what part of this was. So it was a new experience for us and a very successful one. In fact, the website is now continuing to excerpt parts of the book. It started this last Sunday. For the next month, it's going to do that. So there's going to be continuing feedback from that, public discussion of some of the things we may be able to do. So it's part of some of the research is traditional, but the way this is coming about is very new and sort of reflects what's different about our era versus.
No, I really appreciate that. I mean, obviously, when you talk about two guys who've been working together for 4 decades, the fact that you're dealing in and co-inventing new ways of doing things is highly encouraging. I really do recommend the site because I think in addition to your work, there are other people posting things and so on all around these issues. So it's a lively place if these issues of inequality and basically what has gone wrong is something that matters to you. So the thing that I mentioned in the introduction, and I think I even heard one of you chuckle when you realized I was starting with the words of your 92 newspaper article. A lot of people, as I say, over the last, as you were pointing out when you were talking about the origin of that site, that 4 or 5 years ago people started saying, hey, this is getting worse. We're really, and so on. A lot of people, and as I said, Hacker and Pearson's, Win It All Politics and so on, the work of David K. Johnston. There's a lot of people working in the fields that you were working in with that book 20 years ago. What did you find out in putting this book together that was new to you? Where were the new dots? What were the surprises?
There are 2 things here. One is it's not so much a surprise, but a comment on the book, and then we'll tell you a surprise. But one of the things that's different about the book than a lot of the things that you're reading now, and a number of the people you mentioned, some of them are good friends of ours, so there's no criticism.
Sure.
But one of the things we've tried to do in this book is step back a little bit, because there's been so much preoccupation with the banking frauds of the last 3 to 4 years, and the mortgage meltdown, the unemployment rate. All of these things are tragic and horrible. But we make the point in the book that this is just the latest in a series of steps that have been going on for more than 3 decades that have been hammering the middle class. And it needs to be seen in that context, because even when the unemployment rate goes down, even when the economy put that in quotes, gets a little better. The middle class overall isn't going to be any better. The problems that have been going for a long time, the elimination of pensions, stagnant incomes, good-paying jobs, none of that is showing up for the future. So that's one of the things that we think is a little different about the book. It takes a much longer view.
Right.
People know there's a lot of problems out there. Everybody's facing some aspect of this, one way or another. What we try to show in this book, and this is why it's a little different than the one 20 years ago, which was more a description of what had happened. We try to show, why it happened, who did it, who's responsible for this, and what's going to happen unless something puts a stop to it. One of the bigger surprises to us was what's happening in the whole service industry. If you go back 20 years ago, everybody would say, that's okay, manufacturing, those are dirty jobs, let them go. Let some poor schmuck over there in China or somewhere, let them do it. Let's save the smart jobs.
We'll be the knowledge workers.
We'll be the knowledge workers. We'll have that. Well, what's happening to those jobs now? That's a big part of this book. I mean, you can just see the evolution of all these forces that hammered the blue-collar people, now moving full scale into the white-collar fields. And we have interviews with people who had very good jobs. Some of them had multiple degrees, who are out doing minimum wage jobs now or rethinking their careers. Many of them are working, but they're making maybe 2/3 of what they made before or half what they made before. So I think that was one of the biggest surprises we had. And sort of coupled with that, the other interesting surprise was it's fascinating. Rich people, a lot of conservatives have never liked the federal government. They don't like government interference in any way. But you see what began happening in the 70s. They began to actually pull themselves together, create these foundations, these think tanks, spewing out their message in a way that was very organized and very effective. And an awful lot of news media bought into this malarkey and began to create the impression that there were two sides to these things like regulations and taxes, when in fact all the tax cuts of recent years have benefited just a tiny sliver of the population. It's not a two-sided story. So those were, I think, some of the main surprises that we write about in the book.
People often wonder, okay, what mistakes have you made? And the overwhelming one in what went wrong was we completely misjudged how fast this country was going to unravel. And you go back now and look at where we were 20 years ago and look at where we are now, and it just leaves you breathless. Back in, toward in 1980s, people were all still trying to get defined benefit pensions, the kind of pension that would give them a fixed income once they retired. And we made the point back then that if things keep going the way they are, there won't be any. And there aren't any. They're gone, except for public employees. Public employees have them. But in private industry, there are no more defined benefit pensions. And, of course, what's interesting is the elite always have an explanation for what's taking place that fits for them. In this case, with the defined benefit pensions, it is, well, people are going to be changing jobs more often. Every 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a new job. You may even have an entirely new career. So you can't have a defined benefit pension. That was malarkey back then, of course, and it's malarkey now. What's happened is that, and this was, we didn't say this was coming from hedge fund people 3 or 4 years ago. It did not get a lot of play in regular press. But the hedge fund people said, hey, they coined this word plutonomy, which is really just another word for plutocracy. But basically, the economy being stitched together in the United States was a plutonomy, government of, by, and for the rich. And they made the point that the middle class was no longer necessary. And that may sound a bit hockey to say something like that. And their point was very simple. The middle class in China dwarfs the middle class here. The middle class in India dwarfs the one here. The middle class in Brazil dwarfs the one here. So we can dump the U.S. middle class, focus on the middle classes in other countries, which is, of course, part of the explanation why so much of U.S. business is offshore, and we'll all get rich. And that's exactly what has happened. And I don't think it has dawned on people yet what this country was going to look like in another 20 years.
Right.
And if something isn't done, it is going to be very, very ugly.
Yeah. One line that you said that you've said in describing the difference between then and now is that 20 years ago, middle Americans still had options.
Yes.
Right. And that is in a country that prizes freedom.
That's exactly right.
The lack of options is a critical factor.
And if a family ran into a rough patch back 20 years ago, you took out a home equity loan, tied you over. Well, the home equity loans are all gone because everybody's lost. In the middle class, most people have lost the equity they once had if they haven't lost their homes. So that's one option right off the table at the top. Now, there's always going to be a middle class. It is just going to be a shriveled middle class.
Yeah, and the other thing I think in that plutonomy case is, as Ad Age said, the people you want to appeal to in America are the very wealthy. Gauge your products and your advertising towards them because they're the ones that have money to spend. Yeah,
I mean, here are the mainstream upscale publications basically saying, we really don't need these ordinary people out there.
Yeah.
The people we want to reach are the people with money.
Yep.
And why do they have money? And the reason they have money, and this is the point we make in the book, what we find ourselves in this country isn't the result of some natural disaster like a hurricane or something like that. This is public policy that has led to these results. Tax policy, trade, you name it. But all of those things are at the root of this. They're not natural causes. And that's what so many economists contend. We're part of a global economy. What are you going to do? There's a bigger world out there. And if everybody in this country was sharing equally on that, if everybody's income was stagnating or going down a little bit, you'd say, okay. But that's not what's happening. I mean, there's a huge shift where most people are suffering economically.
And that's the other thing that's really disturbing about this. We used to, in this country, have a sense of fairness, of people being treated equally. And the economy that exists out there today, and here we are in the midst of a presidential election, and you get no sense of this whatsoever. The money is just continues to grow exponentially at the top while it continues to disappear from the middle. And I don't know, we can't figure out why people can't see that this is not good.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I'd like to do, and tell me if it's okay with you guys, is as I was preparing for the interview, I read the Wall Street Journal review.
Yes.
Oh, hey, okay. I'm tell you right off.
I'm gonna give you some quotes from him, and let you respond. Okay?
Oh, you're gonna make our day.
Okay, great. Government to the Rescue by George. I think it's pronounced Malone. Is that correct?
I think.
Yeah. So he's a former deputy editor of the journal Editorial Page, which should tell you something, and author of The Great Money Binge, Spending Our Way to Socialism. Okay, quotes from that review. The maddening thing about books like The Betrayal of the American Dream is that the authors offer very little serious discussion of why Washington produces so many rules and how the voters might exact better behavior from presumed malefactors.
Well, rules, the fact is, the rules have been eliminated in many cases.
Or they've been rejiggered to produce this effect.
Exactly, or rejiggered and to benefit a tiny number. But, I mean, we call it the tape in the head syndrome. This whole conservative shtick philosophical, it's very similar. Taxes are too high, there are too many government regulations. There's a couple of other things in there. Got to get government off our backs. Entrepreneurs are being discouraged. It's like about 6 talking points that you push any button on one of these folks, and they come out with that. By the way, we would have been extremely disappointed had the Journal not attacked us, because they have a long tradition of attacking us, and we wear this like kind of a merit badge. I'm not talking about the news columns. The news columns of the Journal have always been very good for the most part, but the editorial page is the Journal's answer to the funny papers and other newspapers, and they just constantly have these folks from outer space writing about economic issues.
the rich need to have their spokespeople in the media, and the journal serves that purpose.
On its editorial pages, yeah.
Yeah, on the editorial pages. Yeah, that's fine. But I'll tell you what's really different now is we go out and interview someone, and you run into these people, and these are just straightaway interviews. It's like Jim said, there's a tape in the head, and they begin spouting this stuff, and it is just chilling. It is really chilling that people can't think on their own.
Yeah. Let me give you a couple of other specifics so you can blast them, okay? This is the one about manufacturing jobs. So here's the quote from the Wall Street Journal Review. According to University of Michigan economist Mark Perry, the U.S. has indeed lost more than 7 million manufacturing jobs since the late 70s. But that loss has been mainly due to productivity gains that make American products more competitive in world markets. The U.S. remains a manufacturing giant, the most productive nation in the world. Now, is the U.S. still a manufacturing giant relative to its size and its history? First question. And what is the impact of productivity gains, which really means how much work can you squeeze out of a worker? Of productivity gains, what's the impact on the middle class?
Well, two things on manufacturing, and then we'll each take a shot at parts of this. But the U.S. still is a significant manufacturing country. And in fact, we make the point in the book that if we just keep doing what we're doing, though, there's not going to be any manufacturing left. We have to at least make a priority to try to preserve what we have. It's not a matter of bringing jobs back. But the jobs that have been lost, the idea that this is just technology and productivity is just completely ridiculous. I mean, talk to the people who used to make printed circuit boards in this country. This was an industry founded in this country, small but very important in the heart of computers. Now, basically almost completely gone. It's gone elsewhere. China, various other parts of Asia. Flatware. All down the line, you can find industries where the jobs have been exported. We have a whole section in the book about Boeing. Boeing, to get business in China, has been establishing manufacturing facilities in China. Those are jobs that in an earlier time, presumably, would have been in the United States. So the idea that these jobs have disappeared just because of productivity is just completely ridiculous. I mean, these jobs are elsewhere, and you can take two...
They moved the jobs overseas. I mean, well, I guess it is productivity.
I mean, there's some
but not in the way they mean, or in the way that word has been used traditionally. That's another aspect of this is it would be worthy an entire book, and that is the twisting of the American language to fit things that it was, that just aren't so.
Well, I mean, that's what I was trying to point out about productivity, is that people, when you hear America's the most productive country, you go, yay, USA. What it really means is that those workers that were laid off when the recession started and haven't been rehired, if that company's producing more now, they're doing it the same number. They're doing it with less people, and that shows up as a productivity gain.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And it sounds like a good thing. What it means is workers are getting squeezed and their wages aren't being raised.
You see the same thing in the healthcare industry, where private companies now own hospitals. A lot of them have cut the staffs of those hospitals to make the hospitals more, quote, efficient. And it also leads to profits for the companies that run those hospitals. But very often, that has just thrown tremendous amount more work on the nurses and the other professionals. I mean, so you're absolutely right. It's not because we're just such a great, efficient country in every way.
Right.
It's because there's a speed up in the work and a different set of rules.
Yeah, whenever you get more work out of someone and don't pay them anymore, that's a productivity gain.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good for somebody.
Now you pay them less.
Right. Okay, let's go on to another one, and this one really blew my mind. He says it's on taxes where the authors really go haywire. And he says, they fail to mention that the American tax system has become more, not less, progressive. Under the 5 administrations beginning with Ronald Reagan, economist Michael Stoop has devised a progressivity index illustrating that trend. Reagan and the Democratic Congresses of the 80s dropped millions from the tax rolls. The 2003 Bush tax cuts freed further millions and increased progressivity, going beyond the point where the rich, however defined, pay the lion's share of all income taxes. Now, in addition to how do you respond to what he said, isn't he cherry-picking when he cites income taxes?
Well, yeah, he is in a way, but the fact of the matter is, we use, there are a lot of numbers in the book, but there are two numbers that people only need to remember out of this book when it comes to taxes. And that's this. The first is this. In 1955, the top 400 households, top 400 in income,
richest, right,
paid 51.2% of their income in taxes, federal taxes. In 2007, that was 16.6%. So how is that more progressive? I mean, I don't understand. You go from 51.2 to 16.6 and we're more progressive than ever? I don't think so. These people, when it comes to taxes, flat out lie all the time. And this is the scary thing I was talking about. It's like Jim said, the ordinary people out there who really don't think for themselves, they just replay this tape from their heads because we hear it over and over when we do interviews. Well, the tax system is... I learned, this was me, I learned one really valuable lesson out of this. Don't do irony
right.
in this kind of subject because you're dead. And we had one book entitled some years ago, Who Really Pays the Taxes? And that phrase wound up in this one. And I get this call from this guy. He says, what do you mean who really pays? All you got to do is look at the statistics, and you can see who pays it. The top people pay it. And I think, oh, God. And the point of that, when we wrote it, and this tells you how people's thinking has changed. When we wrote that years ago, people understood that what we were saying is who really pays the taxes. If you're only making $30,000 a year and you're paying federal income tax, you have so much money to feed your family, to feed and house and clothe your family. And you reach a point where that tax is so high, you're in trouble. So, but somebody today takes that to mean, well, look at these people. They're paying millions in federal income tax. That's who's paying the taxes.
And
they have no understanding whatsoever that the people at the top have never in history had such a low tax rate, effective tax rate, as they have now.
And this is such an important point because people don't know that. And the idea that it's more progressive now, I mean, it's just totally ridiculous.
It's a lie. And
it is.
One of the things you say is, here's another quote from you guys. In 2003, when Congress made dividend income taxable at 15%, this was the first time ever that dividend income was treated differently than somebody earning a wage or a salary. And, of course, this is how the rich – that's why I said cherry picking when he cites income tax, because their payroll tax is capped at, what is it, 100, 120, 142?
Yeah, it's in that range.
Yeah. So if you make $1 billion or you make $250,000 or you make $1 million, most of it has no payroll tax on it. And then this dividend income taxable at 15%, I didn't realize that was a new invention in 2003.
Yeah. And because in most of history, dividend income's been roughly about the same as whatever your normal tax rate would be, whatever bracket you were in. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have this in the book. I know we have it in the book. In the late 70s, around 80, that income actually went up. That rate went up, I think, to 70%.
And the carried interest thing. Explain that one.
Well, if you have to explain it, then you're not capable of understanding this. That's the part we really like. When these corporate types and the people who want the rich to really accumulate all the money, that's one of their responses. Well, it's just so complex you can't understand it. That's a favorite of Wall Street, which is, of course, why Wall Street has crashed the economy. It's created something that is totally false.
The reason it's false is that the folks who run these private equity funds, they're paid a salary like anybody else. Of course, it's a big salary.
Yeah. And
that salary is taxed at the highest rate at a certain point, maybe now 39% plus, I guess it is. I'm sorry, 35. But what they do is they take a piece of some of the deals they do, a piece of a company. They take stock in it. And then when they sell that stock, taxes owed on that are 15%, even though they didn't put in any money to buy that stock. It was just a giveaway to them from the company as part of the deal.
That's what I like.
It was a gift. That's
you're
why
treated as an
Romney's
investor.
tax rate is so low.
Yeah, you're treated as an investor without having to put any skin in the game.
Exactly. Right. It's like you would go to Las Vegas and play the craps tables and take your winnings and not have to worry about any losing because you didn't lose.
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to talk briefly about solutions, but I realize we've got about 4 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down your list of solutions, recommend the book again, and then I'm going to ask you one last question.
Sure.
The Betrayal of the American Dream, when it comes to solutions, revise the tax code, make free trade really fair, invest in America, and that's infrastructure, which we did, which Dwight Eisenhower did, the highway system as a defense for national security, but investing in America now, they don't want to do. I don't understand this, but I guess if maybe you can have your own gated community and your factories in another country, what does it matter?
You don't need it.
Rethink training and uphold the law, actually enforce the laws that are there. Now, you've been watching this happen and get worse for over 20 years. At the same time, you've watched Washington and politics get less capable of solving problems. So the problems get worse, but Washington gets less capable. Now, it's not necessarily in your job description as investigative reporters, but you obviously deeply and passionately want to see things turn around. The nearly unlimited money involved in elections and lobbying demands that everyone raise enormous sums. So once you raise the price of admission, you eliminate anyone who's unwilling to play that game. Both parties now rely on the same funders. Cynicism about the process grows. Ads dominate the conversation. The middle class votes against its economic interest. How do you see that changing?
Well, I think one of the things, and this is really beyond our immediate sphere, but the current system seems impervious to reform. And, in fact, there are some people out there who say the only solution to this is truly a constitutional amendment by which you really do figure out a way to limit money in politics and so forth. And it's highly unlikely that will happen. But something like that, or at least the threat of that, might be the answer at some point, because the Citizens United ruling, just has further exacerbated this whole problem. The problem was very bad before that in terms of the money coming into politics, because even when the Congress is sort of in a halfway reform-minded mode, the money knocks it down. We mentioned carried interest a second ago. Well, not so long ago, just about 3 years ago, there was a real boomlet on Capitol Hill by some, mainly Democrats, to change that and to repeal that and to at least make it more in line with the tax code. The private equity industry organized. They got their lobby going. They brought their big guns down, like Henry Kravis, to come in and call on senators and representatives and to explain the alleged danger of this. But the main thing was behind the scenes, the money was being pumped every which way to make sure that bill went nowhere. That was a Congress that was almost halfway reform-minded, not like the one we got now. And that thing went down to defeat because the money is so powerful, the money is so instructive.
And the other part of
this
is
about losing jobs and so forth.
And I don't know what you do about this, but it's like Jim said with this tape playing over and over in the head. You've got a huge chunk of the middle class or below now speaking against their own best interests.
Yep.
And see,
I'm talking specifically the Tea Party. I don't understand those people at all. I really
think a lot of this, though, is what the conservative movement has done in terms of these think tanks.
Yeah.
Where they keep spewing out this message. The message goes into the mainstream of a lot of the media, and people start repeating things, and they think, wow, flat tax, that'd be great for everybody, wouldn't it? No, it wouldn't. You'd end up being hosed.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out is I think it might have been Dixon, but that wonderful expose in Rolling Stone recently about what's happened to Dodd-Frank, that nowadays even Congress passing a bill doesn't matter because over the next year it'll get shredded while it's being implemented.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So people look that up. Rolling Stone, I don't know, last month on Dodd-Frank. Again, the book is The Betrayal of the American Dream. To learn more, go to americawhatwentwrong.org and barlettandsteel.com. That's BARLETT and Steele, S-T-E-E-L-E, all one word. You can listen to this week's conversation and many others anytime during the week by linking to the podcast. You can sign up to have it delivered to you weekly. You can do both of those things at my website or at iTunes. The website is TerrenceMcNally.net, TerrenceMcNally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com. They're the same website. If you want to receive my weekly email announcement telling you who's going to be on, what we're going to talk about, and some background on the issues, you can sign up at the site or by emailing me at temcnally, TEMCNALLY @mac.com. You can check out Freeform with Terrence McNally on Facebook and follow me on Twitter at McNally Terrence. Thanks to G and to Teddy, my engineers, to Stan Mizrahi and Mark Maxwell in production, to Matt Perez in traffic, and to you, my listeners. I look forward to being with you again next week. And finally, Don Barlett and Jim Steele, keep up the good work.
Thanks so much.
I'm David Pakman, host of The David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Check out my show at davidpakman.com. That's David, Pakman.com.
Hey, I have a really good story. I love these just blatant double standard instances of hypocrisy, and we have one from an anti-state health insurance Republican who is on the government health care plan. And it actually turns out that 6 of the 7 Republican senators who voted to kill Republican Governor Bill Haslam's proposal to extend health coverage to almost 300,000 low-income Tennesseans are actually enrolled themselves in the state's government health care plan. And this includes Senator Todd Gardenhire of Chattanooga, according to records that have been obtained by the Associated Press. And this is relevant because during the committee debate where Gardenhire opposed the expansion of health care, of state health care for low-income Tennesseans, he claimed that he used private insurance. But as it turns out, and as it had been pointed out by a Democratic member of that legislative body, many of the Tennessee General Assembly members themselves are receiving subsidized health plans or health coverage, and Gardenhire himself, Lewis, is on that same plan. Now, the problem is that we seem to be having a semantic disagreement because he says that he is covered by his wife's private employer, saying my wife's on Social Security. Rather, let me take a step back. His wife is on Social Security. He is covered by his private employer, except that he has now been notified that, no, he is indeed covered by the state insurance plan. And now his explanation is, okay, I have it, but I don't use it. I use Morgan Stanley's insurance, which is far greater. When I signed up, everybody said, here, sign these papers, so I simply said, okay. I think that there are several problems here. Number one is the obvious double standard. He voted to deprive his state's low-income residents of access to affordable health care in spite of the fact that he receives affordable health care from the state, in spite of saying that he doesn't use it. But more concerning to me is that he said he just signed the papers that were put in front of him without reading them. Someone who is in charge of drafting and passing legislation in Tennessee admitted, Lewis, he just signed whatever they put in front of him. He doesn't even know what it is.
Well, this is what happens in Congress, isn't it? I mean, there are these, 600, 700, 800 page bills that are written up by not Congress members, and then they are not read by Congress members, and then they are voted on by Congress members. So I think this is just business as usual in our government.
And the last part that is just hilarious to me is that when he was confronted about the fact that he actually has this state plan, in spite of the fact that he's against the state offering health insurance to more people, he says, my wife is all set because she's covered by Social Security. Social Security is a federal government program that is a bigger line item even than defense spending at 24% of the total. Part of his defense is that his wife is all set because she has Social Security. It's just incredible that these guys don't realize the absurdity of what they're saying. Coming up next, Bill Scher will join us to talk about Democratic Party populism. Is it a new fad, or is it something that has been there for a while, which has merely been ignored by corporate media? That's coming up next.
You've been listening to part of the David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. For full audio and video podcasts, interviews, and much more, check out our website, davidpakman.com. That's David, Pakman.com. PACMAN.com, and check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show.